All right, guys. This will be pretty bad, I'm gonna guess, since it's the first video. I'm gonna do my best not to look right into the camera because that'll probably be creepy. But I'm gonna do this step by step, and pretty sure I've figured out how to do a long video, but I may keep this lecture kind of broken up over 2 or 3 15-minute bits. So we're gonna start with chapter 4 of that last part. Hopefully everybody's finished the book by now. Wearing these to block out noise in the background, sort of in a interesting situation with kids and kind of where we have to be right now. But anyway, so chapter 3 ends with April, really maybe the first real time we get to see her open up in a way that she really hadn't to Frank, or maybe even to herself, and comes to this realization that she's just not a sentimental person and that she doesn't know who she really is. And of course it leads to that scene with Shep. Chapter 4, it's a long journey. Chapter 4 is one of the most important chapters of the book. As we see Frank, he's got a jaunty resignation, moving towards Marine's house. He's heading there to break up with her. She sort of served her purpose for him. He's been able to wrap up this lecture series that had kind of become this thing for him, where he was finding himself. I mean, granted, he's finding himself in boring ass corporate work, but it's something, and it's the reason really, or it's the out he needed. He would never tell April that he really wanted to do this, but it seems that he does. And we see this list of, speaking of sales analysis, speaking of cost accounting, speaking of payroll, these things that he's put together. He's found out from Pollock that the project's finalized, and he's going to get a bonus. I think the bonus is maybe $3,000 a year, which is pretty incredible at the time. Note though that it goes towards a lot of that money will be used for April's pregnancy, which is something Frank, he has admitted he doesn't want, even though he claimed he did, as a way of keeping them from going to Europe, and her psychoanalysis, which early in the book is something Frank lashed out at, the idea of psychoanalysts. And now this extra money is going to be filling these things that have solved other problems that we're sort of trying to fill this void he has anyway. It's sort of a never-ending cycle. You'll see the same sort of thing in Raymond Carver's stories, only you're dealing with characters who don't have as much money. But anyway, so he and April talking about it a little bit. We find out too that April's sleeping on the couch again. Frank says this doesn't bother him. In fact, in this long section, it didn't upset him. It annoyed him, but it didn't upset him. Why should it? It was her problem. What boundless reaches of good health, what a wealth of peace there was in this newfound ability to sort out and identify the facts of their separate personalities. This is Frank imagining once again who he is, and putting on an act of sense to himself, saying that I'm not the type of husband now that's going to be concerned with this. If she wants to sleep on the couch, she can sleep on the damn couch. I'm unsentimental. I don't worry about it. Perfect. My low power note just came on, so this one may be shorter than the other ones. Anyway, he's pictured her psychiatrist. Those of you who've seen Mad Men know that, no spoilers here really, but the relationship between a housewife in the mid-50s and her psychiatrist was truly, in the end, a relationship between the psychiatrist and what he tells the husband in private about the conversations. But he imagines this psychiatrist, and he meant to break up with Marine earlier, but he can't. So she's invited him to her place, and he's going to go there, and he's going to end it. Before he can do that, we get a nice little moment with a very, very good, not even really a tertiary character, just like one scene, and it's Marine's roommate Norma. And Norma, very much like John Givings, although in a different way, is really able to pinpoint everything that Frank's all about. And she's irritated. She's irritated at Maureen because Maureen has called off this vacation that they put together because she's in love with Frank, and this upsets Maureen. This upsets Norma, and they talk back and forth. Frank keeps her at arm's distance, and then finally Norma calls him on. She says, "Look, let's try to understand each other. I think you're probably a very good, serious boy with a nice wife and a couple of nice kids out there in Connecticut. And I think possibly all that's happened here is you've gone and gotten yourself involved in a very human, very understandable situation. Doesn't that about sum it up?" And to which we're all going, "Yeah, that's pretty much what's going on." He's not going to settle for that. He doesn't want anybody reading him or knowing him. So he's like, no. And so in his response, he insults her. He says she's meddling, she's tiresome, and definitely a pain in his ass. Have a nice vacation. He walks out, and it's this great moment he feels like, where he's like, yeah, I got her. And he just feels good about it. He walks with strides, his good, cool, sexy walk or whatever. And he starts laughing about it, just how he told her off. Then there's this really sort of human moment, and I really like it, from Frank, where he leans around the corner and he sees Norma getting in her cab, and for a moment he feels really sorry he lashed out like that. He was sorry. He lashed out, felt good in the moment, and then he sees her, and something about her just, I don't know, bothers him. So this is Frank too. This is the multiple sides of Frank. He can be an asshole and say these things at the same time. He wishes he didn't care, but he does. Anyway, but he has to pull himself together because he's got to break up with Maureen. So he gets to Maureen's. It's a great contrast with the first time we see Maureen's apartment, which wasn't ready for company, and I think it smelled like bacon or something. And whenever he'd taken her back there and they'd had sex for the first time, and he walks in and he hears her call him. There's some drinks and stuff on the table. She knows him. He made a stiff drink because he's worried. He's afraid to break up with her. She asks, "Did you close the door? Did you lock it?" And then she steps out, and what's going on? She's stark naked. Note the difference now between the first time, when she'd sort of tried to cover herself up after they had sex, and now she's just completely exposed. She's allowed herself to fall for him, to think that he's felt the same way. I mean, you can make some contrast here with Miranda in Sexy, perhaps. She dances around him nude this whole time. I mean, what just a perfect expression of this exposure that these characters throughout this book have been fearing, and Maureen just really letting her guard down. And she's young, and it's just one of those moments that you feel really bad. So she murmurs hello, she kisses him, and he has to fight it off. This line, when he made it, she drew back and looked at him in dismay, her breasts wagging like little startled faces. Like even like the parts of the anatomy seem to take on this shocked and sort of taken aback and exposed look. And he tells her they're going to have a talk, and we know where this is going, and it doesn't end well. Finally, what burns? The veal scallopini burns, and she just tells him to leave. Now Frank, this is Frank's afternoon. Up, down. He feels confident, feels good, doesn't care about April sleeping on the couch. Then Norma tells him basically who he really is. That hurts him, but then he lashes out and gets to say something, and then he's up again, and he's laughing about it, but then he kind of goes down because he feels bad about it, but then he builds himself up again to tell Maureen what he's going to do, and then now he's down again. So he heads to Grand Central Station, tries to drink it away. It blurs. Starting to worry the next day about seeing her, but then he remembers, oh wait, she's on vacation. She'll probably find a new job, and I won't have to see her at all again. Look at it's my 272. It says anxious thoughts of Maureen. Should he call her up? Should he write a letter? Still preoccupied him on Saturday, and he would he'd put some work in on the tablets, and he realized he just says forget it. You could compare this to the scene in The Things They Carried when Jimmy Cross is considering the letter he's going to write for Kiowa's parents. about what happened to Kiowa. And eventually he just sort of absolves himself of the guilt, of the necessity to write the letter. I mean, and you can't, I mean, obviously you gotta, it's context, it's 1955, but I mean, this is just a horrible thing he's done. He's in a position where he has put her in a place where she's the one who has to go look for other work because of this, and will go look for work because of this. And he's put himself in his head that I'm not even going to write the letter, I'm not even going to bother about it. So he sort of absolved himself of this responsibility, this human responsibility he has. It's a beautiful day, and then for a moment, Frank has this sort of epiphany. And as with AR, with Frank, usually they're false epiphanies. But he's like, you know what? It's been a crazy fucking summer. And in the end, though, it's not going to be that bad. It's going to be okay. And he even sort of reimagines it in his head as like a comedy of errors. Norma going to the curb with her suitcase, the food being burned, and he's like, all now seemed as foolish and distorted as the figures in an animated cartoon at the moment when the bouncing, tinny music swells up and the big circle begins to close in on all sides. And you see, that's all, folks. So it's just all, you know what? It's just part of life. You move on. You don't take it too serious, and you move on from there. Never mind who you hurt, but this is what makes him feel better. He stopped the car on the side of the road until his laughter subsided. He feels better. He goes home, and he decides to dwell on good things. The new money, the conference scheduled for tomorrow morning. It hadn't been such a bad summer after all. Now rolling home, he could look forward to the refreshment of taking a shower, getting into clean clothes. Then he would sip sherry, browse over the Times, and then he would talk to April. And he starts, as he normally does, this sort of rehearsed lines of what he's going to say to her. It's been a kind of crazy summer. We've been under some strain. I knew things looked bleak. And then he gets home. House is neat, white, looked like a place where people lived. He's like swelling up with sentimentality here. And it's a lie. He has this analysis that everything's going to be okay. Of course, we know from how we go, it doesn't end that way. Everything is just good to him. The papers, it's lovely. She's like, yes, it's lovely. He crouches in the mirror of April's dressing table. He used her hand mirror to check the way the collar looked from the side to test the effect and profile of his tightening jaw muscle. He's giving himself his good side to prepare for. And many of you pointed this out, or some of you pointed this out in the feedback, which I love on the Moodle, about this is how he sort of builds himself up. And he needs to see that reflection, looking as it needs to look. So he asks about Sherry. She's distant from him, and he starts with his line, and it's exactly how he's planned it. But she's prepared, and she's different now than the April we saw, or she's more cognizant, I guess, of who she is than the April we saw at the beginning of the book. And especially the April we saw whenever they were trying to figure out whether or not to keep the baby. Now she cuts right to the chase, no bullshit, and she sees right through him. She says, basically, the only reason you're bringing this up is that I'm not sleeping with you and you want to know why. I'm sorry, Frank. I don't feel like talking about it. Backs off. Okay. What do you feel like talking about? And she's like, how about we just don't talk about anything? Of course, that's Frank's best trait. You know how hard it is for somebody who's a great talker to say, to tell them to be quiet. It's like taking, Superman's ability to, fly away, and, Batman's detective skills away, and take away Aquaman's ability to, fucking swim or whatever, control the sea creatures away. But Frank is a talker. He says it doesn't bother him, though. I don't think I suggest we talk about everything all the time. She says, all right. And she tells him this. And it's a line that doesn't land necessarily as hard as it should, because Frank has such a different vision of what is going on in their relationship. And she says, it's because I don't love you. Now we've come all the way from, hold on a second. I'm going to start a new one real quick.